What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I just want to give you guys a little bit of a post-swap update on my 1998 Honda Accord. It's been a little over a week since we completed the swap, and I've done quite a few little things to kind of finish the car off, and also I just want to go over how the swap is affecting the way the car drives and if it was worth it or not. But anyways, I'm going to go through a few little things that I've done in the past few hundred miles to improve the car and just kind of, like I said, finish it off. So first off, we finished the swap, obviously in the part 4 video, and the first thing I wanted to do right after that was to get the keys reprogrammed for the car so that we wouldn't have to use a janky 2 keys taped together method to start the vehicle. And so that was the first thing I did. I went to the Honda dealership and we got new keys programmed. As you can see, this is a brand new key for the car. I got one new key made, which is this one. Got that cut and programmed, and I also got my 2 other master keys programmed to the ECU as well. So I now have 3 factory master keys that I can use to start the car, so that was pretty awesome. We also got a 4-wheel alignment just because the subframe was removed during the swap, and so that was the first thing that I wanted to do, and that really just helps make the car look factory at all. You really wouldn't be able to tell that this car was transmission swapped unless you took a really close look at the wiring. So from there we did pretty much all mechanical type stuff. So for that, I think I'll pop the hood in a second, but first I just want to give you a quick walk around of the car. As you can see, we got her washed. The new headlights look absolutely awesome. Again, same style as the ones I had before, but they're obviously brand new and not 3 or 4 years old, so they look great, especially with this paint job that was just done a couple of years ago. So I'll go ahead and do another little walk around here. Again, really happy with how it came out. This car is pretty much complete, I think, from this point forward. I don't really have any other large plans with it, but like I said, this blue just really pops in the paint, or pops in the sun, I mean. It's been a little while since I've washed it, so it's kind of nice to just take it in. But again, walking around the car, looks pretty dope. And there you are. She's looking real nice. Anyways, let me go ahead and pop the hood and we'll get into some of the more mechanical stuff that we did. Alright, so the hood is popped. The first thing I want to talk about is the VTEC solenoid leak. I mentioned this in the original swap video, but this guy right here, that is our VTEC solenoid, and that guy was leaking pretty good. And it was leaking all over our freshly cleaned transmission that we put in here. So I wanted to take care of that. So right after I went to the dealership, while I was there, I picked up the new gaskets for this. So there's one on the top for this guy up here, and then there's one on the side that goes into the actual cylinder head. So I replaced both of those and cleaned up the area, and as you might be able to tell, there are no leaks anymore and she's nice and clean. So I'm real happy about that. That was the first major leak that I wanted to fix post-swap. The second thing I wanted to do from there was to clean the throttle body. So this car has always idled a bit funny, and it was just getting a little bit worse than I was okay with. The throttle was getting a little sticky, and again, it just idled kind of erratically. Sometimes it would try to stall out and stuff like that. So anyways, what we did is I pulled this intake off and we shot a whole can of throttle body cleaner in there. Now I made a little bit of a mistake and I didn't have the engine running when we did this, and so the can said to not start the engine. So that's what we did, even though my friend and I were kind of like, well, that doesn't seem right because we could flood the engine. And anyways, that's exactly what happened. Dumped the whole can in there, got it nice and clean, at least a market improvement anyways, but then the car wouldn't start. So anyways, we flooded the engine with throttle body cleaner, so I ended up having to buy new spark plugs. We just decided to do that. We pulled all the spark plugs out and turned it over a few times to kind of kick out some of that extra liquid and such. And so after that, we just decided to put new plugs in because the old ones look kind of meh. And we just held the throttle all the way down. If you hold the throttle all the way down on an older Honda like this, that puts the engine into flood mode, or flood clear mode, I mean. So you pretty much just hold the throttle all the way to the floor and then just crank the motor until it starts. So that's what we did. I also put new ignition wires. This was actually part of the swap, and so I had just done the ignition wires at first, which I didn't mention at any point in the swap video, but we got new Duralast ignition wires on there as well. So it's got new plugs and wires. The distributor's only a couple years old, so the ignition system is running great. And then also what we did is I noticed that the throttle cable from this car was all frayed and kind of just rusting and not looking very good, and the green car that we pulled all the parts out of had a nice new, fairly new looking throttle cable, so we swapped that over as well. And from here on out, the the idle performance and the throttle performance of this car is markedly improved, feels way better, and it's much easier to modulate the throttle given that it's a manual, and that is kind of important. So that was pretty awesome. That was the first or the second major thing that I decided to do. Now, after this, the car was running really well, and I decided to just drive it a few hundred miles, and after about 300 miles, I started to notice a bit of a chirp coming from the car at idle. So if you had the car in neutral, and obviously we're not in any gear and you were just sitting there, engine idling, I started to hear this like click or chirp noise coming from the car, and it took a little bit to go ahead and figure out what this was. Let me go ahead and put in a video clip of the noise just so you know what I'm talking about here. Anyways, I eventually tracked it down to the clutch fork. Now, this is going to be really hard to video, but down there you can see is the clutch fork. There's our slave cylinder, then the clutch fork is connected to it. And I found out that the squeaking noise was coming from the ball pivot that the clutch fork sits on. And when this car is idling, the clutch fork idles or vibrates a little bit, as you might have seen in that video clip. And I guess we just didn't put enough grease on the ball pivot when we put the clutch in and such. And so all I did was I just took some brake grease, I pulled the shift boot off, which again, hard to see. There's a shift boot down in there that covers the clutch fork going into the transmission. Anyways, took that off, shoved a bunch of grease in there with a screwdriver, and the noise is much better. It's still there sometimes, but it's really quiet now. Before it was pretty freaking loud. So anyways, pretty happy with that. And also throughout this process, I just adjusted the actual clutch pedal, made sure everything was perfect, made sure it was disengaging properly and it wasn't riding the clutch when my foot was off of it, measured the pedal free play and all that stuff. So the clutch system is completely in spec and how it should be. I was initially worried that that noise might be the throwout bearing, but again, we replaced it with a brand new one. So I'm glad that I ruled everything else out. The clutch is operating completely normally and always did, but I'm glad that I nailed down that noise isn't something more serious. So that was the another major thing we did. I also put on a new intake hose here. I mentioned this in the swap, of course, but my old one cracked right here, and this is a pretty common problem on these. So anyways, bought a whole new intake hose, which is just this piece here. This airbox is the same, but you know, it's much more malleable and not gonna fall apart. So I just put that on this morning actually. So we no longer have a cracked tube hole over here because this was cracked on mine and it had a big split down there. So the engine won't be sucking in a bunch of gunk and the intake hose isn't going to fall apart. Also, another small thing, we adjusted the headlights to the proper level. I noticed that while I was driving this car, they were kind of pointing at the ground. But what's nice about these headlights is that they actually have a little bubble level in them. So it was really easy to go ahead and adjust these to the proper level. They're doing just fine. I had Sylvania ZXE headlights in there already. So anyways, the headlight performance of this car is pretty good at night now, so that's pretty sweet. Another tiny little thing, this bumper over here never really sat completely perfectly. You can see it's jutting out a little bit here, but it was far worse right after we put it on because it wasn't in the tab. So I kind of messed with this for a while and I got it, you know, better. So it's not like outside of that tab that holds it in. So anyways, this is a little bit better. I think the fender actually on this side is a little bit messed up because you can see the bumper right here is pretty much flush with this headlight, but the fender is kind of in. Anyways, I'm not too concerned about it, but I just wanted to fix that because it did bother me a little bit. And so yeah, that is about it for the exterior mechanical stuff. And she's pretty much complete, like I said. Checked all the fluids and everything, made sure everything is good. And yeah, she's pretty much good to go. I can pretty much just drive her now. And like I said, you would not know that this car was swapped unless you looked at this wiring down there. So that is really the only clue that tells you this car is not a 100% factory manual vehicle. But anyways, yeah, so without further ado, I'm gonna close the hood and then we will go ahead and take a look in the interior. Alright guys, so let's take a look inside. As you can see, we cleaned up the interior after the swap, obviously, but she's looking pretty awesome. Sorry about the sun glare or uneven lighting. There's not much I can do about it. But anyways, yeah, she's looking real nice. I'll go ahead and take a step inside real quick. And yeah, as you can see, here's our nice factory center console. You, again, can't even tell it's factory. It's nice and clean. Got our 5-speed shifter here. Go over to our gauge cluster. You can see, again, she looks factory. Something I wanted to mention before, actually, is, let's see if I can dig the key out here. I'll go ahead and start her up for you guys. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stick the key in, turn the ignition on. You can see the immobilizer goes out, which is great, and also, again, the key fits the ignition nice and factory-like, so that's great. I'll go ahead and start her up. So there we are. So we are sitting at 228,256 miles. We swapped it at about 227,880 or so. So she's had a 450 miles put on her at this point. Something I also wanted to mention is I did mention in the original part 4 of the swap that the gauges over here were a bit screwed up. And I managed to fix both of those. So the temp gauge is right where it needs to be, as you can see, and the fuel gauge, basically all I did for that is I filled up the tank at a gas station, stopped 5 minutes later, pulled the cluster out, and moved the needle to right on full. So it should be pretty much completely accurate from this point out, and like I said, the temp gauge is no longer sitting on H anymore at normal temperature. So anyways, that's fixed. That did bother me, but now everything looks nice and factory, and she's working beautifully. Like I said, ice cold AC, everything works in here. Still got the Pioneer touchscreen unit here. That thing's pretty awesome. It does have Apple CarPlay and whatnot, so this car is pretty nice from the inside. You guys have seen this car before, but the interior is super clean. My mom took great care of it while she had it, and yeah, I'm very happy with this car at the moment. Anyways, let's go for a little drive, and I will continue talking about how it drives. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and demonstrate how this baby drives now. Something I did notice is we still do have some minor like shaking at idle, even with all new motor mounts. I think that's kind of just how these 90s Hondas are, but not a huge deal. Anyways, I guess I will go back this way so we can get on the freeway. As you can see, she's driving beautifully. This transmission shifted awesome before the swap, but now that it has a new clutch, new fluid inside of it, all that good stuff, new mounts and everything, it just feels excellent. There is something to be said about these 90s Honda gearboxes. Now, I've always believed that Honda has some of the best feeling manual transmissions in the business in general, but specifically they're not, these 90s cars just, they feel better in some ways, and I'm in love with the way this thing shifts into every gear like butter. Haven't had any issues with it whatsoever, and again, the gearbox has like 224,000 miles on it, so that is pretty awesome. As for if the swap was worth it, I would say 100%. This car feels totally different. It has a totally different personality compared to the automatic, and it's just way more fun to drive. Okay, we're about to get on the freeway, do a little bit of a pull for you guys. So as you can see, she runs beautifully, no problems at all. Like I said before, this thing is freaking awesome now with the manual. It shifts amazing. I'm so glad that we took the week or whatever it was to do this swap. It's something I've wanted to do for a while with this car, and this is going to make me drive the car more for sure. Now obviously, I still love my 2017 Accord Coupe V6. That's my main like daily driver, but this thing is going to get probably some more miles put on it than it normally would with the automatic in it. So anyways guys, awesome. I'm super happy with the way this turned out. Now that I've taken care of the little things that we just mentioned, this car is pretty much complete from here on out. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this little update on the manual swapped Accord, and I will see you in the next video.